Greetings, everyone. I'm Susan Verona, your host for the first Tech Trek Tuesday webinar. I have with me today Ivan Kovachev, one of Redsif's technical experts. Today, we're diving into email security, Unveiling DMARC, of Focus on Forwarding. Ivan, you ready to take it away?
Yeah, Susan, ready. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. So for today's webinar, I've kind of compiled a list of the most frequently asked questions when it comes to auto forwarding. So in the agenda, as you can see, we'll first cover what is meant by auto forwarding. Not everyone understands the difference between auto forwarding and manual forwarding, so we'll cover that. We'll then see what happens to SPF and DKIM with regards to auto forwarding, how to spot forwarding systems from the DMARC reports in on DMARC, and then what can you do about them. So let's begin. So what is meant by auto forwarding? As I mentioned earlier, there are two types of forwarding that we often come across. One is called manual forwarding, and the other one is auto forwarding. As you can see from this slide towards the bottom, on the right-hand side, I have a screenshot and an example of what manual forwarding is. And that is when you actually receive an email and manually click on the forward button when you would like to forward the original email somewhere else. Now, when you do that, you essentially create a brand new message with your from address and your from domain. So you become the sender of this new email. And that's the manual method. The auto forwarding method is when you as a recipient of emails have actually created an auto forwarding rule. As the example shows on the bottom left, you can set up an auto forwarding rule that says, for example, anything coming into my mailbox, I would like it forwarded to my personal mailbox, whether that's Yahoo, Google, or anywhere else. So this rule automatically picks up the original email that you receive and forwards it to another destination. So that doesn't create a brand new message. It simply auto forwards the original one. And it retains the from address of the original email as it is on its way to the final destination. This is really where the difference lies between these two methods. And this difference is really important. In this illustration, we show you what happens when there is no auto forwarding in an email message. Let's imagine you have domain x.com and an email is sent from Office 365. That's the sending service. And the email is sent to redshift.io. That's the receiving domain. Redshift.io is hosted on Google. So Google will receive the email. It will see it's on behalf of domain x.com coming from Office 365 IP addresses. And Google as the recipient. And remember, this doesn't have an auto forwarding rule. Google as the final recipient will prepare a DMARC report and send it to OnDMARC. OnDMARC will analyze the data and in the reports will show on the domainx.com Office 365 as the sending service, as this is where the email message originated from. So that is an example of no auto forwarding, when an email message is sent from point A to point B, and that's it. Now let's see what happens during auto forwarding. Again, we have domain X as the sending domain and Office 365 as the sending service. We are sending an email to redshift.io recipient, but this time the recipient has actually created an auto forwarding rule that picks up the original message or any message for that matter and auto forwards it to Yahoo. So now we have three parties, Office 365, point A, Redshift.io hosted on Google as the original recipient, which is now point B, and the original message, which is auto-forwarded by Google, going to Yahoo, and Yahoo being point C. So what happens here is the auto-forwarding rule has retained the original from address of the original message. So Yahoo sees an email coming on behalf of domainx.com, not Redshift.io, but domainx.com, but this time coming from Google IP addresses, from Google servers. So what will happen is Yahoo will prepare a DMARC report and send it off to OnDMARC. Now, within OnDMARC, you will see domainx.com as the sending domain, and in your reports, you will see Google as the sending service. And the reason for that is because Yahoo doesn't see Office 365. It sees the email coming from Google IPs. That's the last hop of the mail flow. So in your reports, you will see Google as the sending service. So what happens to SPF and DKIM during this auto forwarding? SPF will actually always fail. And the reason for that is because, as you saw earlier, the IP address changes because now the forwarding system is essentially sending the message on its way to the final destination. So the IP address changes. In our earlier example, rather than seeing the email coming from Office 365, we saw it coming from Google. So SPF will fail. However, if the original message was correctly DKIM signed and Google, as the forwarder, did not modify the email on its way to Yahoo, then Yahoo will correctly validate the email. It will pass DKIM and therefore pass DMARC. So SPF will fail, but DKIM will survive or pass if the original message is not modified. If, however, certain headers of the email or body of the original message are modified during transit and as part of this auto forwarding, then DKIM will also fail. So Yahoo, as the final destination, will prepare a DMARC report, send it off to OnDMARC, and it will show Google as the sender with both SPF and DKIM failing. So this is really important to remember. SPF always fails, but DKIM typically survives if the auto forwarding system doesn't modify the original message. The next question that we typically receive is, how can you spot forwarding systems from the DMARC reports? And this is a great question. Now, let's imagine for a second that we have just started reporting to OnDMARC, and we know that our only legitimate service, and the only one we use, is ForcePoint. And we have SPF actually configured on ForcePoint. As you can see on this screenshot, there is quite a bit of senders in this list, but ForcePoint at the top is sending the biggest email volume. So it's the top sender in terms of email volume, and it's the only one that actually, passes SPF. We have Office 365 passing SPF with 10%, but let's ignore that for a second and only focus on ForcePoint. So we have SPF passing. What's also shown on this screenshot is that DKIM is actually not passing at all for any service, not even for ForcePoint. So it's at 0% across all the senders. Now, let's imagine that we just enabled DKIM on ForcePoint, and we come back to the DMARC reports a few days later, and we see this. Suddenly, ForcePoint is passing DKIM with 12%. That's only a few days later after we've enabled DKIM. But also, some of the other sources in this list have started passing DKIM without us doing anything about them. We don't have control over any of the other systems, but they have also started passing DKIM. A few days later, we come back into the DMARC reports and we see that the DKIM pass rate for ForcePoint has increased even further. And also, many other systems have actually reached a DKIM pass rate of 100%. So what has happened? We enabled DKIM on ForcePoint, and after a few days, other services in our list and in our DMARC reports have started passing DKIM automatically. This typically indicates forwarding behavior. This indicates to you that Google Workspace, as well as other systems that have suddenly started passing DKIM without you doing anything about them or having a DNS record in your DNS for them, started passing. Those indicate forwarding behavior. And as you can see, all the forwarders that did not modify your message survived DKIM with 100%. So you can very quickly tell what those forwarders are and ignore them from the DMARC reports. What can you do about auto-forwarding systems? Now, as we mentioned, auto-forwarders can kind of fall into two categories: good auto-forwarders and bad auto-forwarders. The bad ones being the ones that actually modify your message and cause it to fail, and the good ones not modifying your message, therefore causing DKIM to survive and pass DMARC overall. there is not really much you can do about auto forwarders at the in the end, and that is because, as we mentioned, auto forwarding systems are actually your recipients, the people that you send emails to, that have configured this auto forwarding behavior. So there is not much you can do about them. However, if you find that there is critical emails that are failing due to some auto forwarding, what you can do, if you've identified the actual recipient that is causing this, what you can do is contact the recipient and ask them to stop the auto forwarding process. Make them aware of what's happening to your emails and that they're causing your emails to fail DMARC and be lost. You can ask them to stop the auto forwarding process. You can actually also ask the recipient to rewrite the from address. So rather than keep the original from address, which would be your domain, rewrite the from address to contain a domain that they own. This way, they cannot and will not break the original message, as DMARC will be evaluated against their domain. The recipient can provide you with the final destination. So ask them, where are you actually auto-forwarding the messages to? Let us send the emails there rather than continue to have this auto-forwarding behavior. Or you can also separate the critical traffic into a subdomain. You can split this critical email traffic into a subdomain, therefore causing your parent domain, the main domain, to, let's say, move into a DMARC policy of reject successfully, while you can have a DMARC policy of none on the subdomain and not, affected by the reject policy of the parent domain. So to conclude, when you're looking at the on DMARC reports and you're wondering, what you should do about those forwarders, what are all these systems that we've seen in our list of senders? Remember, focus on your assets. Like in the ForcePoint example, ForcePoint is the only service we need to focus on. Have that service first configured with SPF and DKIM, and then monitor the results afterwards a few days later. See if any other services start passing automatically. Those would indicate they are actually forwarders. Don't spend too much time and energy on all the services that you see in the list of DMARC reports. You can get, they can grow up to hundreds or even thousands, depending on the email volume and how many recipients you send emails to. They can grow to a really large number. So focus only on the assets. Spend time on the first 1, 2 to 3 pages worth of DMARC reports. The assets tend to appear towards the top of your reports. They will have the biggest email volume, will pass SPF and DKIM, and in particular DKIM. You need to really focus on that protocol, and then ignore the rest of the senders. That's really it. Feel free to ask any questions. Susan?
Yeah, I don't see any questions. You did a nice job capturing all the questions that are normally asked. So there's one last thing we want to talk about, and that is just our CIS-based community. Many of you are already joined into the community, and you've already become a member of the On DMARC group. But if you haven't, it's important that you join the On DMARC forum group. Here, we're going to publicize more upcoming Tech Trek events, as well as you may see questions and comments from our moderators from Redshift. You'll also see some information coming in from product management and lots of good stuff. So when you join this group, you'll get a notification when something is happening. And that way we will be able to inform you of all that's happening around On DMARC at Redshift. So thank you for joining that group, and thank you again for joining our session today. If there aren't any other questions, we'll wrap it up. Okay, thank you, Ivan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.